Hey guys, welcome to A Little Bit of Monica. We are here to take a look back at the month of July and go through all the books that I managed to read during the month and how they've contributed to some of my year-long goals for reading and basically how it lined up with my TBR for July. So without any further ado, let's jump into what July looked like by going over some of my stats to start out. I managed to read a total of 9 books in completion, but I had 1 DNF, so that means I attempted to read 10 books and I made it through 9. And of those 9 books, 7 of them were arcs that I had access to early before release day, so I'm really excited to have quite a few of those to add. This is probably, I think, the most arcs that I read in any one month so far this year, where my goal has been to read as many arcs as I can in the month before they release, just so I know that I have enough time to read through them before the official publication day. And July was very successful for this, so I'm really excited to go over what those books are and kind of give a glimpse of if they're already out or when they might be coming out, because some have already been released and other ones are yet to come out in the future. So I'll go through some of those as I go through the books, but let's go over some of my formats as well, because I do like to highlight the formats that I read in. I read in audio, physical, and ebook, sometimes a combination of the 3, but essentially all of the books are going to fall into at least one of those categories. So starting off with the audiobooks, this is probably the lowest audiobook month I've had in a long time, and that's because a lot of these books were arcs and I didn't have access to an ALC for a listening copy. So I only read 4 books on audiobook this month, and because this year has been a lot easier for me to listen to an audiobook and also follow along with physical or ebook, it's honestly really surprising that only 4 of these books had audiobooks, but I take what I can get, and I only had 4 audiobooks to work with. So I ended up having a lot more books that I read physically and an ebook copy. I read 6 books physically, and I will have those physically to hold and show you, but then I also had 5 books that I read on ebook, and I actually had at least 1 or 2 books where I had the ebook and the physical book at the same time, so that's also going to kind of help those odds. Things are never going to add up exactly to 9, and that's okay. But after we have looked now at my total numbers and also at my formats, it's time to go into my star ratings. And this month was honestly really sad because I didn't have any 5-star reads. Yeah, I didn't have any 5-star reads, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't reading really good books and books that I'm really excited to talk about. So I ended up having 6 4 stars, which I think is also really, really fantastic. And then I also had 3 books that were 3 stars. And then I unfortunately had 1 book that I did DNF it, but I made it 50%. So I did give it a 2-star rating. It just wasn't for me, but I'll get into that as well. Let's start going through each of these books and I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of my thoughts. First, we are going to start off with my Stephen King book club book, and this was Kudo for July. This is definitely one of his shorter books by Stephen King standards compared to some of the other ones that we read this year that are upwards of 500, 600, 700 pages. So I was thankful that this one was a lot shorter. Also because I do remember watching this movie when I was very, very little, probably too little to be watching it, and I didn't have a lot of memories of this, so I was excited to dive in a little bit deeper, and I ended up really liking this book. I gave this 4 stars, kind of more like 4.25. I feel like the reading experience was really fun in here because I found myself always wanting to pick the book up. I was literally walking across my house with the book open, almost tripping over my cats because I was just so like engaged with the story. I was listening to the audiobook and reading this one physically, and it was just a really fun experience. Stephen King just has a way of making fear feel very visceral. I really appreciated that. There were also some things in here that I was not expecting, but I like that we get a full picture of all the characters and their interpersonal drama, but also how it's going to relate to this giant rabid Saint Bernard. I thought this was a lot of fun, so I'm really excited to have read that one. Next up, we are going to take a look at the arcs that I had for July. Some of these are already out and other ones have yet to come out, so I will go over some of those. The first one was one that is already out, and it is Not So Fast by Karen Booth. This one I received because I was accepted into the Harlequin Shameless Romantics program a while back, and this is one of the books that they had put out. I did receive it after the release date, but I still had a fantastic time reading this, and I landed on 4 stars for this one. This is a Formula One romance, which I have only read once before. I didn't love it, so I was a little bit wary going into this, but I ended up really, really enjoying this. It is a romance between a podcaster who really goes viral when she starts to kind of trash talk one of the Formula One drivers, who is admittedly her favorite driver, but he is having a really, really rough season. But then whenever they end up meeting at one of the races that she is invited to, the two are going to find over time that they have a lot in common, and they find a bit of like a camaraderie between the two of them. And I love the advancements of this romance. I like the way that they interact with each other, and I like the communication that they have. I do think there was a lot of really healthy communication within the romance. romance that was really, really good for this. The miscommunication came a lot with the public image, which I also think was a really fun kind of thing that we get to see here because both of them have public platforms. So we have the public image of what their relationship should or should not be. And I just think that this was a really fun way to incorporate a bit of miscommunication without it being within the relationship that can just be a little bit complicated. But anyway, I had a lot of fun with this one, and I had this one in ebook and in audio, so it was really nice to be able to read it in both formats. Very, very quick read and a lot of fun. Moving on to the next one, I had an arc for The Future Saints by Ashley Winstead, and this book is not out yet. It comes out next year, so I think this is the furthest out arc that I have read in a while, but I'm really excited that I read this because I have loved every single book that I've ever read from Ashley Winstead. I think she has incredible writing, and everything that she writes just feels very natural to me, so I was very excited to have this one, although this is a very different tone than any of her other books, and I do think that that's one of the things that tripped me up with this. I didn't love it as much as I had hoped I would. I gave this one 3 stars, probably like 3.5, but I really liked the concept. I just feel like parts of it were a little bit slow. This story is about a band that is really falling apart after their manager and friend had passed away previously, and when this new manager is brought in to try to clean up the pieces and make sure that this band can still function properly, there's a lot of butting of heads between band members and the manager, and they're all just kind of self-destructing in a way, but no one as much as the lead singer, songwriter, guitarist, Hannah, and Hannah's going to really be hit hard with the grief. And in my opinion, I think this was marketed to be kind of like a contemporary romance. I think the romance was very much a side plot here, and it was definitely not my favorite element. This book is honestly very, very focused on grief, and I thought it was done very, very well. Hannah's a very, very messy character. It was just not what I was expecting, which I think is kind of where my rating ended up coming from. I think if I read this book again closer to the release or once it's out, I think I'm going to enjoy this book a lot more. It was just my expectations going into it. Marketed as a romance, I would not call this a romance. There is a romance in the story, and it is one that's very intriguing, and it's one that I liked following, but I just think that it was very much a side plot. That does not change my opinion. I still love Ashley Winstead, and I will still buy every single book that she writes because I love her and I love her writing. But we have to move on to the next arc that I had, which is one that I was also very, very excited to have because I have the new Chuck Tingle, Lucky Day. This one comes out in August, and I will be going to one of the events on the tour for this book as well, so I'm really excited to have already read this one. This is a very classic Chuck Tingle horror type of story where on one day, millions of people all died pretty much at the same time in like a 20-minute span, all from very weird ways, like fish falling from the sky or a monkey with a typewriter. Things that should not have been happening were happening, and lots of people died, and it became a very well-known event called the low probability event because there was a low probability that all of those things would be happening at the same time. Our main character is a statistician, so she knows the odds of everything, and this story is going to very much focus on gambling and odds because we are going to be looking at a casino, which is kind of a common denominator in a lot of the things that are happening in this story, and our main character along with an agent are going to end up investigating this low probability event to see, you know, what was behind it and could it happen again. I really liked this story. I thought it was very fun and it was very fast-paced. It's also very short. So the fact that it's fast-paced and short at the same time meant that this was a very quick reading experience, and I ultimately had a lot of fun with it, and I'm really looking forward to hearing Chuck Tingle talk about this book, the writing of it, and kind of all the meaning behind everything because this book is wild. It gets wild, okay? Oh, and in case I didn't mention, I did end up giving this book 4 stars as well because I had so much fun with it. It felt a lot like a Final Destination kind of vibe, and I was always obsessed with the Final Destination movies, so this was just right up my alley, honestly. Next up, we have another 4-star read, and this was the very last book that I managed to read in the month of July, and it was Well Actually by Maisie Eddings. This book came out on August 5th, so I read it before the book was released, but not before this video came out, and honestly, I had so much fun reading this book. It is compared a lot to the concept of the chicken shop date with Amelia de Moldenberg because our main character in this book runs a hot dog eating interview, but when she accidentally does a drunken TikTok video about her poor experience with another influencer 6 years prior when they were in college, her ex that she was insulting on the internet is now brought in to be her next interview, and the two of them are going to embark on a series of dates for Riley to prove to Eva that he has changed, that he no longer is the frat boy that she knew in college, and that he has truly changed changed and can be the type of man that women deserve to be with. I really liked getting to see the trajectory of this romance, seeing the way that they butt heads at the beginning. Eva's just a very, very fiery character. She has a lot of personality. She has a lot of just like sass. Like she is just very sarcastic and can be a little bit mean a lot. And so she has this abrasive personality. She's very messy, but Riley is like the golden retriever type. And I really liked the clashing of these personalities, but the way that Riley was like so gone for her for the entire book, it was just very, very cute getting to see the two of them come to terms with their own feelings throughout the story, hearing about their backgrounds and why things were messy in the first place, and getting to see them both grow as characters. My one complaint about this one is that I think Eva's a terrible friend. There were a couple of scenes in the book that made me angry, and if I were her friend, I'm not sure I would have been after those. But I do think that in general, as this romance, I really liked it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I read this in a couple of sittings because, again, it was just this kind of story that once you were in it, you like didn't want to let go. Next up, we have a couple of physical arcs that I received, so I'm really excited because this first one is one of the first physical arcs I ever received from Gallery Books. One Yellow Eye by Lee Radford. This is a sci-fi horror. I think it is supposed to be sci-fi horror, but like emphasis on the sci-fi. This is about a zombie epidemic, and our main character's husband was infected, but she has kept him alive and chained in her spare room while she, as a scientist, works on trying to find the cure for this zombie virus. The problem is everyone else has already been killed. All of the other zombies are gone and eradicated, and everybody else thinks that her husband is dead because they knew he was infected. So this whole existence of the husband is very secret, and this story is going to be very, very heavily focused on what it means to love a person so much that you are willing to go to any length to save them, find this cure, lying to everyone you know, breaking so many rules, and really endangering a lot of people by keeping a zombie alive. But she's doing it because of how much she loves her husband, so you kind of have to think like, is it worth it or is it not? I do want to emphasize how much this book is focused on the sci-fi. There's a lot of sci-fi terminology, scientific words that are going to be used that I didn't even know what they meant. But I think in the context of everything, I didn't need to know what a lot of the like really long terms meant because it made sense in context. It was just, if you understand it, great. But if you don't, it's okay because you're going to understand what is happening in the story around those words. So I thought this was a really fun story. And again, I read this pretty quickly. Given the fact that I didn't have an audio for this, I only read it physically. I had a lot of fun with this sci-fi adventure, and I loved getting to see inside this like zombie virus and what was all behind that. The next book that I have was another physical arc that I received. I had this one physically and in ebook, so I was able to switch back and forth a lot, but this was an arc that I received from my local indie in advance of a book release party, and I was super excited to be able to read The Library at Helpor by Cassandra Caw in advance of this event, and I honestly had a lot of fun with this book. I did land on a 3 to 3.5 star rating, mostly because while I loved how violent and bloody and gory and gutsy this book was, like literally intestines were spilled on like every other page. It was insane and incredible. I loved the violence, but there were some elements, especially towards the end of the book, that turned into more of like a cosmic kind of concept that was a little harder for me to grasp and see exactly where the twists were. But we are following a group of students, specifically Alessa, who wakes up at the beginning of the book. She wakes up at the school that she was involuntarily enrolled at, and this is the Helpor Technical Institute for the Gifted, where it's like all of the monsters of the world are sent there, but they're monsters because they have abilities and like magic that basically makes them capable of bringing out the end of the world. They are capable of mass destruction and bringing about the end of humanity. And I think it's so funny that all of the politicians and leaders of the world thought it was a good idea to send all these people to one place, because what could go wrong? Well, the thing that went wrong wasn't even what you would expect, because on their graduation day, the professors at the school feast on the students, and the students didn't know it was coming. But there are a group of students who manage to survive and hide out in the library, but they are then instructed that they need to kill each other off until there's only one person standing. So we are going to get to see the characters interact with each other and use their abilities on each other as they are fighting the fear of not only each other, but also what stands outside the door. So I do really love the concept here, and this is a more of like a dark academia horror kind of vibe, and I really liked this. I just think that some of the elements towards the end, when you're coming upon like some of those mind-bending types of twists, my brain was incapable of comprehending some of it, but otherwise I had a lot of fun, and this is super short, so it was very quick to get through. And next up we have another arc that I ended up having the e-arc of this one, which I tried to read in June. If you watched my June wrap up, you will also know that I tried to read this book before, and I soft DNF'd it because I couldn't remember anything from book one, but I also was halfway through rereading the arc, like retrying to read it when the book actually came out, and I ended up getting some physical copies of it. So while I did start this book on on my Kindle. I ended up getting, this is the Illumicrate special edition because it matches the first book, and I did already have the Jsad Heir in the special edition. So I have the paperback and the Illumicrate edition of the Jsad Crown by Sarah Hashem, and this was another 4-star read. This was an incredible book, and I absolutely loved it. If not for the fact that I had to retry it because I couldn't remember anything about book 1, I think this could have been a 5-star read because this book is incredible. The world building, the slow burn romance, the yearning that happens in this book, everything about this was so much fun, and we have so many important and really intriguing characters that we get to not only know from the previous book, but we also meet some new people in this book that are really, really fun. So I had a lot of fun reading this book and getting to explore a little bit more of the world. Things are really expanded, and we get to see a lot more into the background of the magic and the power that these characters have. I thought this was so much fun, and getting to see Essia kind of grow into her power when she is very obviously thrust into something she's uncomfortable with, when she ends up taking a crown that she is totally unprepared for. I just love getting to see her growth, as well as Aaron when he is in charge of his own people, and the two of them are clashing politically, but end up being so gone for each other that they will do anything in their power to make sure the other is okay. I love, 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 love this romance, and I love the world building. Everything about this was so fun. I just wish there was a little bit of a summary or a recap at the beginning to help people, because I read the first book 2 years ago. There was no way I was going to remember the details I needed to go into this book. So that wraps up all of the arcs that I ended up reading, but I do still have 2 more books that I want to talk about, and these were some of my special editions. So obviously this one counts as a special edition since I did end up getting a copy, but I do have 2 books that I read in July that were like subscription box books. So let's go through those. This first one is Exquisite Ruined by Adrienne May, and unfortunately this was the book that I DNF'd in July. I made it 52% or something in this book, and then I had to give up. I was just not vibing with it. This is going to kind of follow the myth of the Minotaur in the labyrinth, where our 2 characters are going to find themselves trapped in the labyrinth and they have to help each other get out. The problem is that our female main character has amnesia and does not remember how the 2 of them know each other, and as the story goes on you slowly start to uncover some of their history, and honestly I just didn't love it. I didn't love their history. There was a lot of question of whether either of them had kind of like sexually manipulated each other, and it was just like a weird vibe. I was just not enjoying it. I was also very bored. I feel like nothing was happening. It was a very like circuitous kind of story where like they'd go to one area and they'd like try to get out, and then they'd move to the next area, and then they'd like try to walk through it, and like just it felt like things were just going around in circles but nothing was ever happening. And on top of that, I was not rooting for the relationship because I feel like I was not supposed to like either of them, and I'd like to root for my characters at least a little bit, even when they're terrible. And I love books where the main characters are terrible, but I feel like this was supposed to be, I don't know, I feel like I was supposed to root for them, but I couldn't because there was nothing to tell me whether they were good or bad. I don't know, it's just a very confusing time. So I'm sad to be giving up this copy. This is the Illumicrate Romantasy edition, and I will be putting this on my Pango because I only gave it 2 stars. I just couldn't do it. So anyway, the next book that I have to talk about, and this is the last book for my wrap up, is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean, and this was an Illumicrate special edition. I first of all am obsessed with this design. I think this is absolutely stunning. The artwork in this book is one of my favorite things to ever exist because it showcases some of the vibrant colors that are represented within the story, which this story is going to be about the Phoenix Keeper, who she works in the aviary of the zoo, and her charges specifically is a very rare and endangered phoenix where they are in line to potentially get a new breeding program introduced into their zoo. But Ayla is a very socially awkward, and she just like doesn't read social cues super well, and she's just very uncomfortable in social environments. And so when she has to ask other people for help, that's where she runs into a lot of trouble. There's also one particular character that also works at the zoo that she had a negative experience with when they were in college, and she has hung on to that grudge for years since then. And the 2 of them are going to be the 2 at the core of the romance within the story, which I do think the romance ends up being really cute. My main problem and why this book ended up getting 3 stars ultimately is because I think that the grudge that Ayla held against Luciana was so unnecessary and over dramatized, like the type of thing that you should have gotten over in like a month or 2 at school. You should not have been carrying this through adulthood and also into your careers, because it did end up impacting a lot of what they did at the zoo. So all of that was just kind of frustrating, but I do really like the 2 of them when they are working together. I liked getting to see that explored, and there's a bit of a heist going on in here because the breeding program that they are trying to set up at the zoo is kind of in danger of people trying to break in and steal the eggs because that had happened at a previous zoo. So lots of of potential danger going into the story, and it's just super fun to get to see the characters all interact and kind of the group mentality of people trying to protect their zoo animals. I thought this was a super fun story. Just that romance thing really got to me, and it was a large part of the book, which is why it took the rating down so far. But ultimately, I did have a lot of fun, and I'm obsessed with the design of that book. So beautiful. But anyway, those are all the books that I managed to read in July. It was a much slower reading month than I have had usually this year, but honestly, I had a really fun month anyway, and I feel like it was kind of a nice reset. I've been pushing myself really, really hard, and it's nice to have a little bit of a slower month to catch things up and be able to feel confident going into the next month. So even though it was only 9 books that I managed to finish with 1 DNF, I feel like it was still a really solid month, and getting to move through some of those arcs just felt really, really good and definitely helped me to feel more prepared going into the next couple of months coming up. So now I would love to hear your thoughts. If you've read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're interested in picking any of them up, I would love to hear that as well. I want to thank you so much for being here, for watching this video and supporting me. I always appreciate every second that you spend here. So I want to thank you for being here now, and I really hope that I will see you in the next video. Bye!